I'm building some frames for a project at work. I'm actually building suggestion boxes, but I'm doing a frame in the front that measures on the inside 8.5 inches by 11 inches so that you can just put in a standard sheet of printer paper in there with some kind of whatever message you want to have on there. You know, it could change for the occasion, or just gives it a little bit more flexibility in its final use. I'm prototyping first in flame box elder, not because this is just the cheap wood for prototyping, it's because I happen to have a lot of it right now. And I think this is going to end up being a finished box, but I'm not going to turn in a pink suggestion box at the office. The final is going to be in beech and purpleheart. And so I'm doing all my cuts over here first. And once I get it right on these pieces, then I go over and do the cuts on the beech and purpleheart. And I did an 1/8 of an inch round over on all of the edges, just to soften the edge and still let the wood speak for itself, because there's some pretty cool grain over here and some nice color contrast on this one. And when I got to the end, I decided to try doing an 1/8 of an inch round over on the inside of the miter as well on the prototype piece. And then I put it back together over here, and I thought it looked kind of cool. It's just something you don't see every day. Maybe because it's kind of difficult to do. It's going to complicate the gluing, it's going to complicate the finishing. The cut itself was a little tricky to make. Or maybe just you don't see it every day because it looks like crap. I don't know, I guess you can be the judge of that. And post your opinions down in the comments, because I'm still kind of undecided. But I thought it looked kind of cool here, and so I tried it out on the purpleheart and beech pieces. I was a little reluctant to cut these at first because I'd gotten all of these miters absolutely flawless. I mean, there's no gap there whatsoever. The initial cuts off the saw were pretty good, but I had to do a bit of hand planing and scraping on some of them to get them to fit just right and perfectly square frames. So it was a tough decision to after getting that miter perfect, to draw more attention to it, because usually you're trying to hide the fact that the wood is connected there instead of accentuating it. But sometimes it's kind of cool to highlight the joinery, so that's what I'm going to do on these pieces. I was nervous about making these cuts because I had some tear out on this one, because as you're cutting with the router bit, when you're cutting this way, that's a very smooth finish you're going to get because you're cutting downhill on that grain. You can just shear right down the board like that. But when you're cutting the mating piece, you're going in the opposite direction. So you're cutting uphill, it's going to tear out and chip more, and the finish on this one was very rough. This is a much softer wood than purpleheart and beech. These are both very dense and hard woods. So the grain was tearing out easier on here. I was more concerned about just flat out chipping on this and having pieces snap off and go flying across the room. So I was nervous about making the cut, and I thought of some different approaches to do it. I was this close to building a radius plane so that I could just do it by hand in both directions, but that was going to take too long, and I wanted to just finish it up on the router table. So I tried a few different approaches. I landed on something that worked out pretty well, at least for these types of wood, and we can head over to the router table now and take a look at that. I have an 1/8 of an inch round over bit in the router table, and it has a bearing, but I'm using the fence because it's going to be a lot easier to push things through with the backer block if the fence is there. And this is just to make sure that I don't get a lot of chipping on the end when when the router bit comes out the other side. This backer block will support the wood so that I don't get chipping on the lagging end here. And the trick is, which is not extremely complicated, it's just something I had to figure out, so I'm passing it on to you. The trick is just figuring out the right depth and the right speed so that I don't get a lot of tear out and chipping, but I also don't get a lot of burning. Now you can see right here, that's some burning from just cutting this on the miter saw with a clean and sharp 80-tooth blade. And then on some of these pieces that I was doing the edge profile on, with the 1/8 of an inch round over bit, I got some burning just because I slowed down for a second or went a little bit too slowly. You can see it on the edges there. So it's got to be fast enough to avoid that, because I really don't want to have to sand a lot of burning off of the edge of the miters. So I used this scrap piece of purpleheart to do some test cuts until I got it just right. And what worked out pretty well for me, which was a little faster than I expected, but I did 2 passes, and this is where a router lift really comes in handy, so you can do repeatable measurements. I dropped it down a 32nd of an inch, or rather a 64th of an inch, and I made the first cut. And I went at about that speed. And then I raised it up another 1/64 of an inch to my final cut, and then I made the second pass at about that speed. And this is the edge that I got there, and that looks pretty good. I mean, there's not a lot of chipping. There's really not any chipping. It's just a little rough because I'm going uphill on the grain, but that'll sand out very easily. And there's not any burning. So that was the correct formula that seemed to work for the beech and purple heart combination. You know, if you're going to try something similar with the rounded miters like that, just try it out with a similar piece of scrap wood first till you get it just right, and that way you don't burn up your or chip out your project pieces. So let's just do the rest of these right now, and you can see how it works. I used a sanding block with some 220 grit to clean up all of the router cuts, and it really didn't take that much effort. I mean, they were pretty good as they were. I just cleaned off some of the fuzzies, and I also did the inside edges so that when I glue everything together, there's less sanding to be done there. It just makes it a little bit easier. So let's swap this out with the prototype pieces and see how it looks. Got these all labeled, so just in case there were any minor variations, it wouldn't affect the final fit of any of the frames. Something like that. I think it looks pretty good. It was a little bit of a risky modification, but I think I like it. We'll see how it turns out on the final product. Conditions permitting, I will do a build video for the whole suggestion box. I'm a little bit backed up on my video queue right now, but I'm hoping to catch up within the next 5 or 10 years. So there's the idea if you want to try it out, if you like it. It's not really that hard to do. Just make sure that you have some scrap pieces and do some test cuts first before you mess up your project pieces. And I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and have fun.